for 22 years, the Iranian resistance, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and its president-elect, Mrs. Rajavi, has emphasized that the solution to Iran is neither war nor appeasement. It's to support the people of Iran and their organized resistance to bring about change. She has always warned that, the policy of appeasement is going to lead to a war. And this is just logic, because look at what happened in World War II. That's exactly what happened. And that is the same point that we are at right now. For 40 years, this policy of appeasement toward the mullahs, the fruit that it has bared is the situation that we're in today with the war. But the reality is that democracy is not going to be installed in Iran. Democracy has to be brought about by the people of Iran. And the regime is not going to fall this way, because it's not a classical dictatorship that when you remove the head of it, like Khamenei, for it to collapse. But it has a apparatus intact. It has a structure. So only that top figure is replaced, but that system, it's still there. The fundamentals, the whole system that it's built on, it still exists. At the end of the day, you're not going to be able to create regime change in Iran with bombing and with war. And the reality is that it has to come about from the people of Iran and with their organized resistance. And that is something that we've seen has been brewing inside of Iran for years now. But even if you look in just the past few months, this beginning of 2026, you can see all the signs and the pieces of the puzzle coming together. And I think that is an extremely important message that we need to share with the world today, that the people of Iran have the capability and the potential to bring about change. They're not asking for troops on the ground. They're not asking for war. They're asking for political support. They're asking for having a firm policy on Iran. But they believe that they have the ability to bring about change. What they're asking for is to recognize their rights to resist and to fight in face of such a brutal dictatorship that is ruling Iran.
So basically, you're saying the people of Iran want to fight their own war. They want to overturn the government in their own way. They don't really need intervention. Is this war the United States is now, like they said, they're taking out the Iranian Navy, they're taking out the missiles, but this government is still intact. Like when Donald Trump spoke yesterday, he said the new leader is less radical. Is that so? Is that somebody the people of Iran would want to work with or not?
The reality is that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The reality is that Khamenei's son, he has been part and parcel of this regime for the last 37 years. And he has been side by side with his father and all of those decisions. And in fact, he headed a lot of the projects with the IRGC and the suppression of the Iranian people and the uprisings and whatnot. It's not a break from the regime. It's the continuation of the same thing. And the reality is that we have experienced this. I mean, this is something that we as the resistance knew from day one, practically since 1981. But even I remember back in 1997 when Khatami came into power, everyone, in the West was hoping that maybe this will bring some kind of a change. They say he's a moderate. He wants to bring reform. He's talking about, having dialogue of civilizations and whatnot. But the reality was, from that first day, the Iranian resistance announced, a viper never gives birth to a dove. This regime is unreformable. If it had been reformable, it would have been reformed in 1981 when the possibility still existed. But the reality is that the regime has shown that it's not in its nature, and it's also learned its lessons from the Shah. The minute that the Shah stopped execution and torture in prison, 18 months later, he was gone. He was overthrown, because that was the only way that he was able to keep his grip on power, was through execution, torture, and spreading fear in society. through the Sabak and his immortal guards and whatnot. This regime is the same thing. Why are they having executions in the middle of the war? Because they need to keep that fear factor high. They need to be able to spread fear in society, especially scare people and make them passive that the solution is not armed resistance. The solution is not protesting. The solution is not going to be that you have the power to bring about change yourself. And that is because that is exactly what is the solution and what is the path forward. I think that the world saw the bravery of the Iranian people, both in January, but also if you look in the last 10 years, we've had 4 major uprisings in Iran. And each time you see those uprisings evolve step by step and becoming more radical, becoming more defiant. And in January, we saw that, the protesters, you could see that element of organized resistance on the ground in the protest, which was the result of the activities of resistance units throughout Iran. But you also saw, like, for instance, people working together, supporting one another, the fact that they were disarming the suppressive forces, the fact that they were able to even liberate cities. But unfortunately, there was that internet blackout and the major crackdown by the regime and the massacre that Khamenei created. And the world just stood by and watched. There was a 19-day internet blackout done. And right now it's been 34 days that there's an internet blackout in Iran, practically. And so these are things that the international community could have helped with, because communication would prevent the regime from being able to carry out these massacres, or it would limit its the extent of the suppression that it can implement on the people of Iran. But unfortunately, that was not provided to the people of Iran. And so the regime read between the lines. The regime realized back in January that, hey, if I'm able to, get through this with a massacre or whatever way, but if I'm able to get through this, then the international community is going to bear with me. And how did they get that message? Well, I remember it was day 3 or 4 of the crackdown. Everyone knew that thousands of people had been killed in the streets of Iran. But still, Arafchi, who is the foreign minister of the Iranian regime, was invited to the economic forum in Davos in Switzerland. So what is that message to the Iranian regime? The message is, you can commit a massacre, but still we're willing to negotiate with you because we have financial interests in Iran. Because you're a rich country in oil, you set that stage for us, and so that's important to us. On the other hand, in the past week, with the execution of these political prisoners, there has been practically silence from governments. Yes, international entities like the United Nations, Human Rights Council, or Amnesty International, other entities, or even parliamentarians have been making statements, but no government has made a statement. So what is the message to the Iranian regime? It's a green light. You can continue with these political executions, and no one's going to address it. And that is what paves the way for massacres. We saw the same thing happen back in 1988 in Iran. At the time that the Iran-Iraq war was coming to an end, Khomeini knew that for 8 years he had suppressed any form of dissent inside of the country by saying that we're at foreign war, so you need to keep quiet and you need to, align yourself with the regime and try to, rally around the flag, kind of, in a way. But he knew that the minute that the war ends, people have grievances, they're agitated with this regime and they want to see change. So what did he do? He carried out a massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in just 5-6 weeks. And before anyone knew, it was already too late. At that time, the Iranian diaspora was trying to raise awareness on this massacre and was trying to tell the international world, look, a massacre is happening, you need to react. They didn't know the extent of it because communications were very limited, but they understood what was happening and no one reacted. So that gave that green light and that free hand to the regime carry out that massacre. And every household in Iran, they had either knew someone who had been killed or they had lost someone themselves. And so they were able to instill fear in society for over a decade. The next major uprising in Iran was in the summer of 1999, when our generation actually came into the scene. Like, at that time, I was 18, but it was like college students who were coming to the scene. And it was the first time that we were seeing uprisings form in Iran after the 1980s. And that is exactly what the regime is trying to do now. And so I think it's time for the international community to take that seriously. They need to stand by the people of Iran. They need to recognize these crimes that are being perpetrated, and they need to hold the regime accountable. But also they need to stand by the people of Iran and recognize the right of the Iranian people to fight and to be able to overthrow this regime, and recognize that we're not going to see peace and stability in the region until this regime exists. And this regime is going to exist. It's not going to be taken out without the people of Iran. So you need to allow the people of Iran to bring about that change. And right now, the reality is that war is not limited to specific places being hit or whatnot. This war has already spread to over 12 countries in the region. We are seeing, the infrastructures that are being destroyed. We are seeing, the circumstances that people have in Iran. This is the extent of casualties and the implications of this war are going to remain for decades. But that's not going to bring freedom to Iran. So we need to make sure that this war ends. So then the people of Iran can actually take their destiny into their own hands. Because when there are bombs over your head, you're not going to be able to come to the streets and protest or to be able to fight back against this regime.
So when we cease activity, military activity, when the United States ceases military activity, and I can only say the United States, there are other countries involved, but just say Donald Trump makes a conscious decision to cease military activity in Iran. Have we accomplished anything? First of all, have we weakened the government enough to give the people a bigger upper hand on the scenario of them replacing the government, of them instilling change in Iran? Is this what we're doing today? Is what the United States is doing today? Is this having any effect on implementing that change that you and a lot of people across the world, including all the Iranian people, are hoping for? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?